How's it going, guys, and welcome back to another video. In this episode, we go after one of Australia's most iconic fish, the barramundi. Now these guys can be pretty tricky to spear as they inhabit the coastal areas in the northern reaches of the country, which often comes hand in hand with some super dirty water. They also have a 3-month closed season here in Queensland, which spans over their most active period and often doesn't leave us a lot of opportunity to go after them. Now I've spent countless hours chasing these guys, sometimes with little to no success, but every now and then, when all the conditions align, along with a little bit of luck, we can have some pretty epic trips just like this one. So tag along for what was one of the best days barramundi diving that I've ever had. We started off at a spot that we haven't found many barra on before, but it's usually a bit clearer than a lot of the areas we do find them in, so we decided to have a bit of a warm-up dive. There was a stack of life here, and one of the lads even managed to get a nice coral trout, but we decided not to hang around long as the main goal was to try and find a few barra. Moving on from there, we went to the first of a few ledges that we've had some success on in the past. Now the viz in this clip may not look very appealing, but when it comes to hunting for barra, this was incredibly good. We spent a bit of time here working along the ledge, and we didn't see anything desirable for a while until I spooked this nice barra coming up from a dive. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to swing my gun around fast enough to get a shot off at that fish, so we missed that one. We each had a few more dives, but nobody really saw any more barra, although I did have these couple of kale trevally come in on me. Now I've eaten a few of these flat trevally species like the diamonds and the pennants, and they're usually pretty good, but this wasn't the case for the kales, and I don't really think I'd eat another one. After I shot that trevally, we decided it was time to move on as we had only seen the one barra. Now this next spot was fairly similar to the last, although on this particular spot there's a large tree that sits at the bottom of the ledge, which makes for some really cool scenery while diving. When diving on ledges like this, it can be hard to know where the fish are going to be sitting, so I like to work my way down the ledge slowly over multiple dives in the hope I don't spook them like I did with the previous fish. On this first dive, I came down just far enough that I could see the log in the distance in case there were any fish sitting around it. There was plenty of life as you can see, but I didn't notice any bigger fish, so I went for a breathe up to come back and have a better look. After spending a bit of time here without seeing any barra, we made the call to move on to the next bit of ground. This particular spot was not one I'd been to before, but one of the fellows assured us that there can be some good fish here and the sounder looked promising, so we jumped in for a look. This spot had a bit more current on it, which was stirring up the water quite a bit, but right away we were seeing really good signs here. My first dive, I ran into this school of tarpon, which I've seen with barra quite a few times before, so I decided to work this point for a few dives and see if I could find one. Coming down for my second dive here, I hadn't even made it to the point that I'd planned to sit on when this nice little fish popped up right in front of me. This guy was by no means a monster, but still a pretty good little first barra for the trip. With all the life hanging around here, we decided we'd stay around for a while. I never personally saw another barra, but a couple of the other guys said they'd missed some. However, I found a stack of mangrove jack and had a pretty good time filming a few of these guys. Now, as hard as it was to leave a dive like that, we had to get moving if we wanted to find some better barra. So we jumped back in the boat and we headed on to the next spot. This next area had a little bit less viz again, but there was still enough, so we geared up and jumped back in for a look. Once again, we took our time searching along this ledge, starting with a few shallower dives and slowly working our way down. On my first dive here, I noticed this spot had a fair bit less of the smaller fish than a lot of the other areas. But this isn't always a bad sign with barra, as I find when there is a good school of them hanging around, a lot of these little fish seem to take off, as barra are not very picky and they'll just eat all these little guys, including the brim and the Moses perch and all those things. For this second dive, I pushed a bit further down the ledge to where the rocks started to become a bit more scattered and I found a nice bit of rock to lay on. I was only here for a few seconds when this nice barra cruised in on me and I had my safety on unknowingly, but luckily I was able to switch it off and get the shot off just in time.
Yeah.
At around the 90 centimeter mark, this guy was a much better fish and a pretty perfect example of what we were chasing. While swimming back to the boat with that fish, my SD card in my camera ran out of room. So I spent the next 15 to 20 minutes just clearing out some excess footage so I could get back in again. In that time, the lads threw on another 3 nice barramundi. So I suited up and I jumped back in, but that school had moved on, so it was time for us to go to the next spot. This next spot was definitely the dirtiest we dove for the day, but it was a relatively small area which allowed us a bit better chance at finding where the fish was sitting. When it's as dirty as this, you pretty much have no option other than to find a nice log or a rock to lay on and just hope that one comes your way. It did take a few dives before any of us saw anything, but eventually one of the lads yelled out that he had just missed one. So I headed over to the area he was in and settled in on this log for a dive. Unfortunately, after missing that fish, I never saw another fish here, but one of the lads did manage to nail a nice one. Now, with the end of the day closing in, we decided we'd head to one last spot before we start the trek home. And this next spot is not one that tends to hold a lot of fish, but it's one of my favorites, as it's pretty much just a sunken log, which makes for some really cool diving and gives for really good hiding spots when you're trying to do those longer hunts. On this first dive, I came down towards the top of the tree. I slowly worked my way towards the root system, which is where I usually find most of the fish here. However, I was coming from up current of the tree, which meant I was likely to meet the fish head on, which is less than ideal. So I bailed on that dive and I tried to come down behind it instead. On this next dive, I landed a bit behind the tree, so I slowly crept up to the roots to get myself a bit of a hiding spot. I could see there are quite a lot of fish using this washout under the trunk as a bit of a cover from the current, so I decided to wait here for a bit in the hopes that a barra would come to do the same, and it wasn't too long before this guy showed up. This guy wasn't quite as long as the last one, but he was a really healthy fish and potentially a bit heavier than that other one. With a few good fish now on the esky, I decided I wasn't going to shoot any more barra. The lads had a few more dives on this spot, but they never saw any more fish, so we decided we'd start the journey home. Although with a bit of time still on our hands, we decided we'd have to stop over at one of those previous ledges for one last dive. There was still plenty of life around here, although not quite the same volume as the morning. The large schools of mangrove jacks seemed to have moved on, and between the 4 of us, only 1 or 2 more barra were spotted. We were just about to pull the pin and head for the ramp when I ran into this nice jack and decided to take the shot. That's pretty much it for this video, so if you made it this far, cheers for watching and stay tuned for the next one.